During our Thanksgiving family gathering, my sister was completely caught off guard when she discovered that I had a staggering $12 million sitting in my bank account. The moment this revelation came to light, my entire family's attitude toward me shifted dramatically. I'm Sarah, 38, and I've got something I need to get off my chest. You know those family dynamics where one kid can do no wrong while the other practically doesn't exist? That's my reality. Everything was ordinary until I turned 8. I was an only child, and although my parents weren't overly affectionate, they were there. Mom helped with my homework, and Dad would sometimes take me fishing on Lake St. Clair. We weren't exactly the Brady Bunch, but we were all right. Then one night changed everything. I remember Aunt Kelly showing up at 2 a.m. and telling me to pack a suitcase because Mom was in the hospital. My sister, Rachel, was on her way, even though she wasn't due for another 2 months. The next several weeks were a blur of hospital visits and whispered conversations. Little Rachel, who looked like one of my baby dolls, was hooked up to tubes and wires, and I wasn't allowed to touch her or even get close. That was the moment I first sensed an invisible wall growing between me and the rest of the family. When Rachel finally came home, our house transformed into a sanitized bubble. Mom became obsessed with germs, industrial strength cleaning, hand sanitizer in every room, and non-stop scrubbing. The overpowering smell of bleach still unsettles me today. But here's what really hurt: the tiniest sniffle or cough on my part meant I'd be whisked off to Grandma Marie's or Aunt Kelly's. Every little sign of illness triggered a hasty exit, as if I were a hazard to my precious sister. At first, trips to Grandma's seemed fun. She'd bake cookies and Aunt Kelly had a great stash of Nancy Drew books, but soon I realized I wasn't being sent off on adventures. I was being sidelined, treated like my very presence might put my sister at risk. I tried everything to get a fair shake: ace tests, winning a first prize at a science fair with a project on renewable energy, yet Mom barely spared a glance, too busy juggling Rachel's constant doctor visits. I even remember Dad asking me to store a science display board in the garage because Rachel was supposedly allergic to cardboard. It was surreal. The final straw came when I was 12. I'd been secretly practicing Bridge Over Troubled Water on the piano for the school talent show. And on that big night, Rachel ended up with a 99.1 degrees Fahrenheit fever. Guess who played to an empty room? 2 weeks later, the entire family, including both sets of grandparents, attended Rachel's 15-minute flute recital where she flawlessly played hot cross buns. Rachel quickly learned the system. By age 7, any genuine health hiccup meant she could skip school, while I was expected to soldier on. If I complained of a headache or fatigue, someone else would take over her responsibilities. Worried about a test? Mom would even call the school to extend deadlines. I started retreating into my room, losing myself in books about art history and antiques. It became my sanctuary, especially since Rachel claimed to be allergic to my lavender air freshener, leaving my room as the one safe space. And when she feigned illness, I secretly felt grateful for the chance to get some one-on-one time with Grandma Marie, who always asked about my day and sparked my love for vintage jewelry by letting me organize her stunning costume pieces. Looking back, the worst part wasn't just the blatant favoritism, it was how they twisted the story to justify it. Rachel just needs extra attention because of her rough start, they'd say. I was too young to understand why my robust health somehow made me less deserving of love. Now, I see how those years molded me, instilling the idea that I was somehow unsafe or inconvenient to be around. But hey, at least it taught me to be self-reliant. When no one checks your homework or celebrates your achievements, you learn quickly to become your own biggest fan. High school was polarizing, people either loved it or hated it, but for me, it was a ticket out. While Rachel was busy building her drama empire in middle school, I was laying the groundwork for my escape. There's nothing like the realization that no one is going to do things for you to fuel your own drive. Remember those endless hours I spent organizing Grandma Marie's jewelry? They taught me the value of systematic organization and attention to detail. In high school, my desk became a masterpiece of color-coded notes and meticulously planned study schedules. Rachel would tease, calling me Rainman and Great Sis, but being invisible had its perks. No one was watching my every move, so I could do whatever I wanted. I joined every club that wouldn't conflict with my part-time job at Carson's Diner, big thanks to Carol, the owner, who even remembered my birthday when my own parents forgot. Debate team, National Honor Society president, editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, you name it. It was with the debate team that I found my voice. There's a unique satisfaction in calmly dismantling someone's argument, and it even taught me negotiation skills that later helped me win state competitions twice. Meanwhile, Rachel's major soccer games meant my parents couldn't be in two places at once. She was on the C team and barely played. Junior year was when things really shifted. I took the SAT and scored a flawless 1600, not just pretty good, but perfect. I remember staring at that results screen for nearly 20 minutes, convinced it was an error, then rushing home to share the news. Mom was in the kitchen, busy helping Rachel with her English homework, and the conversation went something like this. My reaction, Mom, look, I got a perfect SAT score. Her reply, that's nice, honey, but can you keep it down? Rachel is trying to study for her big test tomorrow. Rachel chimed in, you're right, some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect. Mom added, Rachel, sweetie, don't stress, you learn in your own way. I still have that hard copy of my SAT results somewhere, never pinned on the fridge like Rachel's C+ in English, which was celebrated with a "We're so proud of you" magnet. Then came college applications. I applied to 15 schools without telling anyone. I wrote my own essays, gathered my own recommendations, and managed all the financial aid paperwork. My guidance counselor, Mr. Chen, was a lifesaver since my parents were too busy to help with the FAFSA. I stayed late after school until acceptances began to pour in. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Michigan, each with a scholarship offer. I locked them away under my bed, knowing if Rachel ever discovered them, their focus would instantly shift to her, as if Sarah going to Harvard meant I'd be all alone. The day I received my full ride offer was surreal. Meanwhile, Rachel joined JV cheerleading. Guess whose accomplishment was celebrated with a big family dinner? Hint, I munched on microwave mac and cheese in my room while they dined at Olive Garden. That scholarship was my golden ticket, full tuition, room and board, plus a book allowance. Finally, I could leave a house where I was either invisible or simply inconvenient. When I got my acceptance package, I headed to my favorite spot in the local library, a fourth-floor window seat overlooking the park, and sat there for an hour, not crying out of sadness but in a wave of relief. Later at dinner, when I announced I was going to UMC, my parents were ecstatic. Dad exclaimed, Michigan? That's so far, while Mom worried, what if Rachel needs you? I shot back, I'm not expecting you to cover extra expenses. Rachel's cheerleading costs a fortune. As always, Rachel was in tears, complaining, oh my God, finally. Can I have your room? I need space for my TikTok videos. The summer before college, I worked double shifts at Carson's Diner to save up. Carol, bless her heart, always tipped me extra and made sure I got to take home any leftover pie. She also taught me valuable lessons about hard work and independence. A vital life skill is learning to recognize genuine people in a world full of pretenders. I remember my mom saying that those who make the most noise often have the least substance. When I moved to Michigan, my parents couldn't make it because, thanks to a surprise cheerleading competition for my sister Rachel, Aunt Kelly stepped in. She drove me to campus, helped set up my dorm, and handed me a $500 envelope from Grandma Marie, along with a note saying she was so proud of me. Later, I discovered that Grandma had been setting aside money from her Social Security checks for months. That first night in my dorm, I made a promise to myself. I would build a life so amazing that being overlooked would be unthinkable, not out of spite, but to prove something to the little 8-year-old girl who once got sent to Grandma's house for sneezing. College blurred by in a whirlwind of all-nighters, instant ramen, and newfound independence. I graduated cum laude from the University of Michigan, though my parents barely noticed since they were busy helping Rachel transfer to her third college in just 2 years. Then, life took an unexpected turn. I landed an entry-level job at a prestigious auction house in Detroit, let's call it Everett and Phillips for anonymity. The place catered to old money clients and specialized in estate sales, cataloging the belongings of wealthy families after they passed away. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. My early days were filled with routine tasks like logging endless sets of china and categorizing vintage furniture. But everything changed when I was assigned to the Kingston estate. Mrs. Kingston, an elderly widow with no children, left behind what everyone assumed was just costume jewelry. While sorting through a pile of items, I noticed an Art Deco brooch. It wasn't flashy, yet something about it felt different. The weight and intricate clasp mechanism weren't typical of costume pieces. I spent my entire lunch break researching old jewelry maker marks and signatures, and later stayed after hours to access several antique jewelry databases using the company's membership. the more I looked, the more I became convinced this brooch was the real deal. The problem was, as the new girl, no one would believe me if I said we had a potential treasure on our hands. So I did what debate team had taught me. I prepared a solid argument. For 2 weeks, during lunch and evenings, I immersed myself in learning everything about authenticating Art Deco jewelry, even using some of my meager savings to pay for an online gemology course. Finally, I gathered the nerve to approach my boss, Mr. Harrison, armed with a presentation complete with comparative images, historical documentation, and every detail I could muster. I told him, "Sir, I think we might have something significant in the Kingston collection." Harrison, barely glancing up from his phone, replied, "Sarah, we've already cataloged these as costume pieces." I persisted, "I know, but look at these maker marks, they match perfectly with a 1925 signature." At last, he looked up and asked, "Where did you learn all this?" I simply said, "I did some research." Long story short, that costume brooch later sold at auction for $47,000. It turned out to be part of a limited collection created for a European set in the 1920s. And that was the turning point. Harrison began to trust my judgment and started sending other artifacts my way. My once mundane task of sorting antique jewels suddenly took on real significance. I threw myself into learning everything about vintage jewelry, taking every online course I could afford, spending weekends at estate sales, and even keeping a small notebook to document my authentication process. My apartment gradually transformed into a jewelry scholar's workshop, with walls plastered with printouts of vintage hallmarks and certification guidelines. The auction house began seeing results. I was uncovering items others had overlooked, developing connections with collectors, and truly understanding the market. My commission checks grew, and for the first time, I wasn't just scraping by, I was saving money. Meanwhile, my family remained remarkably uninterested at our Sunday dinners. I recall them asking, "Mom, Sarah's still at that auction house," while I proudly shared, "Actually, I just authenticated a rare Tiffany piece." And then Rachel would chime in with, "Oh my God, speaking of jewelry, you guys have to see this charm bracelet I bought at the mall." But for once, I didn't care. I discovered something that was entirely mine, something I excelled at beyond just being Rachel's sister. Then came the Rothschild collection. About 2 years into my job, I was part of the team cataloging a massive estate from an old money family. The buzz in the industry was palpable. While reviewing their jewelry, I spotted a seemingly ordinary Art Nouveau piece that everyone else had missed. I spent 3 sleepless days investigating it and discovered it was actually from a famous French jeweler's private collection, once thought to be lost during World War II. When it eventually sold at auction for $238,000, Harrison called me into his office. I thought I was being promoted, but instead he said, "Sarah, you're wasting your talent here. You should be running your own authentication business." At first, I shrugged it off. How could I start a business with almost no money? But the idea stuck. I began taking on modest freelance authentication projects on the side, and soon word spread about my keen eye for detail. Private collectors started contacting me directly. One night, as I sat in my small apartment surrounded by jewelry manuals and the authentication tools I'd slowly accumulated, I had an epiphany. This was something I could do on my own. So, I did what any determined person would. I took out a large loan against my car, emptied my savings, and rented a tiny office in a less than desirable part of town. People thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. I transformed a storage room above a Chinese restaurant into my office. It was about the size of a college dorm, always smelled like Kung Pao chicken, and the Wi-Fi only worked if you sat by the window. But it was mine. The first few months were tough. I'd wake at 4 a.m., drenched in sweat, calculating how many months until my savings were gone, while loan payments weighed on me like a noose. My furnishings were humble, a card table from Goodwill and a chair I found curbside. Don't worry, I cleaned it thoroughly. Yet in the high-end world of jewelry, reputation and connections are everything, and my auction house experience had given me both. I started small by offering authentication work for local antique dealers at lower fees than the big organizations, but soon my meticulous attention to detail became well known. 6 months later, a watershed moment arrived. A dealer I'd worked with from the auction house asked me to authenticate a collection of Victorian-era pieces before a sale. The collection, spanning 3 generations, had me working nonstop for 2 weeks with barely any sleep. I uncovered 2 extremely rare items that had been mistaken for later replicas, and the owner was so impressed with my detailed analysis that she not only paid my fee but also offered a 10% commission on the sale, a commission that netted an extra $86,000, more than I had earned in the previous 2 years combined. Before long, my phone was ringing off the hook. Private collectors, estate lawyers, and even my former auction house began sending authentication work my way. I suspected Harrison was quietly helping to spread the word. By year 2, I had even hired my first employee, Jenny, a fresh gemology graduate who reminded me a lot of my younger self. Though quiet, she was incredibly smart and now leads our authentication team, proving her worth every day. Our firm expanded faster than I ever imagined. We moved to a proper downtown office, said goodbye to the lingering Kung Pao chicken odor, and built a team of specialists. I've earned a reputation for uncovering hidden treasures that others miss. It's almost unbelievable how far we've come. Many valuable historical jewelry pieces often end up being mistaken for costume trinkets hidden away in attics. I kept my true work a secret from my family. They all assumed I simply worked at an old antique shop. As the business grew, keeping up the charade became increasingly difficult. At family dinners, my sister Rachel couldn't resist a sarcastic jab. "Hey Sarah, I was going to donate some old jewelry to Goodwill. Maybe your little shop would be interested," she'd say, not knowing that just that morning I'd authenticated a $1.2 million piece. "Sure, Mom, I'll take a look," I'd reply, while my other sister was introduced as the one handling antique jewelry. Meanwhile, Forbes had quoted my company name, and we'd just opened our third office. Oddly enough, keeping the secret started feeling like an inside joke. I'd sit at Sunday dinner in my Target discount outfit, casually listening to Rachel talk about her entry-level marketing job, even though I had just closed a deal that paid more than her entire annual salary. I even began small games with myself, like wearing genuine Harry Winston pieces to family gatherings just to see if anyone would notice. They never did. Once, while Rachel spent 20 minutes flaunting her $200 Michael Kors watch, I was sporting a vintage PCH Philippe that cost more than her car. The real challenge was managing our rapid growth. By year 5, we had offices in Detroit, Chicago, and New York, and I spent more time on planes than in my own bed. We earned a reputation for discretion, attracting wealthy clients who needed their jewelry authenticated quietly. The money involved was huge. We even had to hire a large team of financial advisors, yet I maintained a relatively modest lifestyle. I bought a nice, understated home in a good neighborhood and drove a luxury car that didn't scream flashy. The only area I really splurged was my home office. I invested in advanced authentication equipment, an impressive security system, and a custom-built vault that would make Fort Knox envious. The irony was palpable. My mom would say things like, "It's so sweet of Sarah to help out," assuming I was cutting back on everything, even eating nothing but ramen, while I had just verified a collection that earned a commission greater than their mortgage. Success is strange. The more you have, the harder it becomes to explain it to those who always saw you as inferior, like trying to describe color to someone who's only ever seen black and white. By that point, my company had cornered the Midwest's high-end jewelry authentication market, and our reputation was solid gold, pun intended. Yet every Sunday I still traveled to my parents' house, playing Sarah the modest antique shop worker. My mornings were spent on conference calls with Dubai collectors, my afternoons were booked with authenticating million-dollar pieces, and my evenings were devoted to family dinners where I wore carefully chosen, normal clothes. I sat through Mom's overcooked pot roast while Rachel recounted another marketing win, usually something trivial like managing to bring her boss's coffee without a spill. One Sunday stands out in my memory. I had just wrapped up a massive deal, authenticating a long-lost Cartier piece that had been locked in a safe deposit box for 40 years, earning a 7-figure commission. Riding high from the success, I drove straight from the meeting to my parents' place. When I arrived, Mom remarked, "Sarah, honey, are you all right? Your clothes look a bit worn." I replied casually, "Oh, just trying to save some money," while wearing a $3,000 cashmere sweater I'd chosen precisely because it looked understated. Rachel chimed in, "If you had a real job instead of playing with old jewelry, Dad." I nearly choked on my pot roast trying not to laugh. Around that time, I began making anonymous monthly transfers to my parents. Aunt Kelly mentioned they were having trouble paying for Rachel's educational loans and medical bills, and Mom even said they might have to sell the house, the very home I grew up in. I couldn't let that happen, so I set up a $5,000 monthly transfer. When questioned, I downplayed it by saying I was saving money by living on rice and beans, and that I was giving away $11,000 in total. They assumed the rest must have come from Aunt Kelly, while Rachel took credit for inspiring everyone to help. Watching Rachel's spending was both amusing and painful. The money helped, but it also changed how my parents saw me, as if I were some noble pauper sacrificing everything for them. Meanwhile, Rachel's spending got wilder. She'd arrive at dinner with expensive new bags, claiming they were outlet finds, which they definitely weren't. Anyone can spot a genuine Gucci from 20 feet away. Soon, she was taking lavish vacations and bragging on Instagram about her lucky life. I'm convinced she used my support money for her shopping sprees, but I kept quiet. Then came the MBA drama. Rachel announced she wanted to return to school for her MBA at a top private university, only the best for the golden child. Mom called me in tears, explaining they couldn't afford it. I suggested, maybe Rachel could look at state schools, they have really good programs too. But Mom replied, "Oh honey, you don't understand, your sister has to maintain certain standards." Then she asked if she could boost her monthly contribution for a few years. I raised it to $7,000, and although my own finances were fine, it stung to hear them praise Rachel for taking the initiative while assuming I was living on ramen. The final twist came when I was invited to give a guest seminar at the very business school Rachel wanted to attend. The dean had personally invited me to speak about luxury goods authenticity and business growth, and my family had no idea. I had to come up with an excuse to miss Sunday dinner that week. Suddenly, it felt as if I were living two very different lives. By day, I ran a multi-million-dollar authentication business, and by night, I was just Sarah, the disappointed daughter working at an antique shop. Thanksgiving marked the breaking point. The weight of my secret was becoming unbearable. Rachel's rude remarks about my career had become routine. Every time, Mom would apologize to her friends for my modest lifestyle, and Dad would suggest I get a real job. I always sensed that things would eventually blow up, but I never imagined it would all unravel so spectacularly on Thanksgiving. 2 weeks before the holiday, Mom called in tears, complaining about back pain from a herniated disc and the overwhelming thought of cooking Thanksgiving for 20 guests. I offered to take over the food, not just out of goodwill, but because I was tired of pretending her dried turkey was appetizing. "Why don't I handle the food this year? I can have it catered," I suggested. She replied, "Oh honey, we can't afford a caterer." I reassured her, "Don't worry about the cost, I've been saving up." Mom hesitated, "Are you taking out a loan?" I coordinated everything with a high-end catering firm I use for business events. They delivered food so incredible it made you wonder why anyone ever bothered to cook, though it cost more than my folks thought I earned in 2 months. Thanksgiving morning came, and I was feeling confident. I had my laptop with me because I needed to monitor a major online auction in Hong Kong for a stunning Art Nouveau necklace. If the client won the bid, I'd need to authenticate the piece immediately. As lunch was served on time, Rachel remarked, "Store-bought stuffing? Really, Sarah? Mom's is so much better, coming from the girl who once set off the smoke alarm while making toast." Mom apologized for not cooking herself, but everyone seemed to enjoy the meal. After tasting the maple-glazed Brussels sprouts, which, by the way, cost more per plate than Rachel's weekly grocery budget, Rachel finally shut up. I stepped away from the dinner table to check my laptop. The auction was heating up, and I needed to be ready in case my client won. I set up in my old bedroom, the one Mom had kept just as it was since high school, while Rachel's room had gone through 3 renovations. And that's when everything went wrong. I'd left my authentication program running with too many tabs open. Displayed on my laptop were various accounts and active contracts. As usual, Rachel burst in without knocking. Some habits never change. She initially came in to borrow my phone charger, but then her eyes landed on my laptop screen. That was her cue to finally expose how pathetic her older sister was. With a self-satisfied smirk, she whispered, "Let's finally show everyone what Sarah's really been up to." Before I could stop her, she grabbed my laptop and marched into the dining room. Imagine this, 20 people, uncles, aunts, cousins, and my parents, sitting down to a Thanksgiving feast of gourmet turkey and expensive wine they mistook for Trader Joe's. Rachel spun the laptop around in triumph, clearly planning to shame me over what she assumed were trivial antique transactions. The room fell silent, as if you could hear the quiet tick of that fancy clock I gave Mom for Christmas, which she always claimed was just a knockoff. My screen read, current balance $12.4 million, pending authentication contract $485,000, recent transaction $1.2 million, and a $4.2 million quarterly profit report from a Hong Kong auction company. Rachel's face flickered through 5 different emotions in just 3 seconds, finally settling between sheer astonishment and disgust. She even swayed on her feet. Under her breath, she whispered, "This can't be right." I asked, "Rachel, honey, what is it?" Her voice cracked as she stuttered, She's rich. Sarah's rich." Suddenly, chaos erupted. The silence deepened before Mom started giggling, really laughing. "Oh, come on, Rachel. Sarah works at that little antique shop," she chuckled. I straightened my basic cashmere sweater, "Yes, the one that costs more than your monthly rent," and replied, "Actually, Mom, I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. For years, while you mock that antique shop, I've been authenticating pieces worth millions." "That little shop you mentioned? It now has offices in 3 cities. Dad choked on his drink, Aunt Kelly dropped her fork, Uncle began coughing. Then Mom's laughter morphed into anger, her face turned red, then purple, and she stood up so abruptly that her chair toppled over. "Mom, you have millions and yet you let us struggle," she screamed. I retorted, "Struggle? I send you $7,000 every month. While you're sitting on millions, your sister is drowning in student loans." Mom shot back. Just like that, congratulations turned to outrage, not because we were proud, but because I hadn't given them more money. Rachel burst into tears, sobbing about how she deserved to know and accusing me of betraying the family. Dad joined in, "How could you be so selfish? We raised you." That was the breaking point for me. Years of feeling ignored, dismissed, and treated as a disappointment in the family all came rushing out. You sent me off to Grandma's whenever I sneezed. You missed every achievement, every award, every milestone, just because you didn't want Rachel to feel left out. You never saved a dime for my college, yet took out loans for her private school. And now you're angry because I built something for myself? For the next 5 minutes, the room descended into mayhem. Mom screamed about family obligations, Dad ranted about ungrateful children, and Rachel alternated between crying and demanding to know exactly how much money I had. Meanwhile, the upscale catering team awkwardly tried to serve dessert. I grabbed my laptop and my Hermes bag, Mom had once complimented it as a nice replica, and walked out. I could still hear Mom discussing how to spend my money, something about funding Rachel's MBA and buying a new car. Once home in my sensible, limited edition BMW, my phone exploded with texts. The family group chat went off the rails. Rachel took to Facebook, posting a lengthy rant about how her millionaire sister had been hoarding wealth while letting the family struggle. The comments section went wild, distant cousins and old high school classmates, people I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly had strong opinions about my character. What stung the most was that Rachel detailed years of me advising Sarah on how to move beyond that little antique shop, all while secretly hiding my true wealth. The betrayal nearly made me hurl my phone across the room. By the way, the only career advice she ever gave me was, try selling jewelry on Etsy. For those unfamiliar, flying monkeys are the toxic family members who guilt-trip you. Soon enough, Aunt Susan, whom I see maybe once every 3 years, called to remind me that family is everything. Uncle Bob, who still seems to think I'm a kid, emailed a lengthy lecture on the importance of sharing wealth. Even my third cousin's wife's sister somehow got my number and felt compelled to share her thoughts on family duty. The real drama began when they showed up at my workplace. On Monday morning, I walked into the reception area to find Mom, Dad, and Rachel waiting. They told Jenny, my receptionist, they had an appointment for authentication services. Rachel clutched her Michael Kors bag as if it were priceless. I said, "Your mother, we've already discussed this as a family." She shot back, "A family discussion without the person in question?" Mom ignored my objection as they demanded I set up trust funds for everyone. "I need at least $2 million to start my new life properly," Rachel declared. Dad added, "Your mother and I want to retire, we're eyeing a beach house in Florida." I replied, "Did you miss the part where I send you $7,000 monthly?" Rachel retorted, "That's nothing compared to what you have. You owe us." I asked, "Owe you for what?" "The years of being ignored, the missed graduations, the constant comparisons." Mom shouted, "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. We gave you everything." I snapped, "No, I gave myself everything. And you know what? I'm done." Right then, in my own office lobby, I canceled the monthly transfers on my phone. Mom gasped like I'd struck her, and Rachel's faint crying quickly halted when she saw the funds weren't coming through. Things turned ugly. They wouldn't leave, so I had to call security. Watching my 60-year-old mother being escorted out, yelling about ungrateful children, was surreal. Jenny asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, but I did have their names added to the building's do not admit list. The harassment continued for weeks, new phone numbers, fake email addresses, even attempts to reach me through my company's customer service. Finally, I sent a formal legal notice, warning them of harassment charges. Then Mom played her final card by calling Grandma Marie. But here's the thing about Grandma Marie, she's wiser than all of us combined. When asked, she simply said, "Good for Sarah, about time someone in this family succeeded on their own terms." Mom didn't speak with her for 2 months afterward. It's been 6 months since Thanksgiving. I moved to a new home with enhanced security and changed all my numbers. And as for the company? It's booming. Turns out, my family drama attracted several high-profile clients who admire my caution. Meanwhile, Rachel continues to post passive-aggressive updates about toxic wealth and family betrayal, and I hear she's launching her own jewelry authentication firm. Good luck with that. Finally, Mom and Dad stopped contacting me after my lawyer sent them an official letter outlining how harassment charges could ruin them. Now they're telling everyone they never wanted my money anyway and praying for my salvation. The best part? For the first time in my life, I feel liberated. No more Sunday dinners filled with sly insults, no more downplaying my achievements just to spare feelings, and no more subsidizing the Rachel show. My therapist says I'm finally setting healthy boundaries, and I say I'm finally living on my own terms. That's my story, Reddit. Thanks for letting me share. Special thanks to the catering firm that sent me a Christmas letter calling the Thanksgiving meal the highlight of their year. A few quick notes. Yes, I'm still in treatment. No, I don't regret cutting them off. Yes, Grandma Marie is doing great. She's coming to visit next month to help me catalog a new collection. One last thing, Rachel, I know you're probably reading this. What about the Cartier bracelet you're flaunting in your latest Instagram post? Spoiler alert, it's fake. Just saying. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more jaw-dropping, real-life stories.